Welcome to Health Matters. My name is Sherri Gallant. I'm with Alberta Health Services. And on today's show, we're going to cover a number of interesting topics. But first off, I'm here with Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Lisette Elumir, and we're going to talk about cannabis. It's legal now, and so many people have so many questions. First of all, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us. What does legalization mean for the general public?
So October 17th was when cannabis was legalized, and this means that people can use cannabis legally, but there are still restrictions just like you see with alcohol and smoking. So it's important to know those and know the legal restrictions about where you can buy it, who can use it, where you can use it, how many plants you can grow at home. There's a lot of restrictions that way. And the Alberta government has a website that summarizes that. It's also important to know that municipalities, each city or town has their own bylaws that may or may not have more restrictions. So it's always good to know what you are allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. The main reason for these restrictions is because we still want to protect the public, and cannabis use, like other substance use, has its risks. So we have to keep that in mind and approach cautiously when we legalize a substance like cannabis.
Can you give us an example of what some of the legal restrictions are?
So, for example, it's for only 18 years and older. You can have you can grow 4 plants in your house. You can only buy it from specific cannabis licensed stores. You can't use cannabis near a school or near a hospital. In certain municipalities, you can't consume it at all in public. You can't smoke in a car. You're not allowed to be legally intoxicated when you're driving, things like that.
Very much like alcohol
Yeah,
rules.
very much like alcohol.
You talked about some health effects. What are some of the health effects?
So cannabis affects each person individually in different ways. So it's always good to try low and go slow. So if you're ever going to try it for the first time, you always should try a lower dose. But some of the things we do know cannabis does is it does affect your lungs, similar to smoking, and it might be worse. It can impact your lungs or because of the toxins. It also can affect brain development, and this is why we recommend delaying use until after 25, because that's when your brain has finished developing. Mm-hmm. It affects things like attention, judgment, decision making, and those are the things we worry about, especially when you're a youth in school. Other effects can be mental health. So there is, especially with frequent or chronic use, there is a higher incidence of depression and anxiety. We do obviously worry about dependency, just like with smoking and alcohol. And we do recommend not to use cannabis if you're pregnant or breastfeeding, because it does transfer to the baby.
It can actually come through the breast milk.
Correct.
Oh, that's very interesting. Are there things that we can tell people on how to mitigate some of these risks?
So the Canadian Centre for Addiction and Mental Health came up with guidelines for lower risk cannabis, and it is available online, and it gives you some, again, it's quite similar to what we talk to people about when it comes to alcohol. So, don't do it when you're pregnant. Don't mix it with alcohol or tobacco. If you do have a history of addictions, or if your family does, to approach with caution. Like I said, delay use until 25. Mm-hmm. The other thing we try to tell people is to avoid the synthetic cannabinoids, and to keep in mind things like dose and frequency. The less is better.
That's the main message, isn't it? We say with so many things moderation, but it might even be less than moderation to be wise about it.
It's just it's individual, so it's always good to be cautious in the beginning.
How do you suggest approaching youth about cannabis?
So the good news is that we have a lot of resources out there online, because we've been preparing for this for a long time. And Drug Free Kids Canada came out with a talking kit, and it talks about the risks of cannabis, but also how do you approach youth, how do you open the conversations. Their main recommendation is to start early, keep the lines of conversation open, and not judging, but more so that people can explore how they think about it. And the other great thing is our Alberta Health Services did a launch that's targeting our youth, and our website that's going to be up on the screen, tailored a whole bunch of messaging for youth. One of them is called the High Q Quiz. It's actually quite funny. I tried it myself and failed. But yeah, so that and a lot of other information that can go. It's user friendly, and it can be helpful when you want to do it with your kids or for them to do it on their own. And like I said, the talking kit is also quite helpful.
And we do have a lot of resources online, but what is Alberta Health Services' actual role in cannabis legalization?
So, as you know, we're not the ones who make the rules. We're the ones who try to, who give information and give people a lot of power to take care of their own health. And so that's what we promote, trying to promote we call the public health approach, which means trying to mitigate the risks, trying to honor people's advocacy or honor people's autonomy, but also trying to use policies and regulations to help them remain healthy without, because sometimes interventions can also be harmful. So we're trying to find that balance, and that's what the public health approach is. So that's why we're saying, trying to restrict and moderation, and trying to protect our vulnerable populations, like our children, protect them from things like secondhand smoke and things like that, and trying to prevent the normalization of smoking. We've gotten past that. We had smoking was quite normal a long, long time ago. We've changed that environment, and so we don't want to go back to that. So our role, obviously, is trying to equip the public to be as knowledgeable as possible and try to keep themselves as healthy as possible, and us protecting them as well.
Thank you so much for being with us and shedding some light on this. It's very much appreciated.
And thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. Stay with us.